whether good times are coming or bad times are coming, the interest in building a cohesive, disentangled community of encouragement and support, I think is beneficial, regardless of where we are on any kind of cultural continuum.
Always be prepared, right? So I just think it's important to be able to stand on your own 2 feet, to be able to know where your food's coming from so you can feed yourself and your family, and just be as free as possible so that you aren't a slave to any system or any one person.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Beyond Labels podcast with yours truly, Joel Salatin, the farmer, and our researcher and study expert, Dr. Sina McCullough. Hi, Sina.
Hi, Joel.
So today we are recording this just after I've gotten back from a conference in Texas, in Austin, called the Exit and Build Conference. It's the brainchild of John Bush, who's a bit of a entrepreneur, self-reliance, prepper, all these kind of combinations. And the theme of the conference was how to create and build, exit the system, if you will, and including exiting the man. I mean, it's everything from exiting the public school system to the investment portfolio to your city job to your city house, and to your exiting your lack of community. Okay, and then building a new future, building a better future. They do Liberty Hub networks around the globe, around the planet, and this is an up and comer. This is a young up and comer guy. John Bush is his name. You can Google him up, and they're just really doing, and what they're really pulling together thematically a lot of people who are in this kind of how do we thrive when things start to unravel? And one of the main themes of this particular gathering was intentional communities, building intentional communities. So there are a lot of people that are realizing, like I've been saying for how long, we need to get close to people who know how to grow things, build things, and fix things. I'm not a conspiracist. I'm not a henny penny, but I am fairly pessimistic about where the overall culture is headed. And so, whether good times are coming or bad times are coming, the interest in building a cohesive, kind of disentangled community of encouragement and support, I think is beneficial, regardless of where we are on any kind of cultural continuum. And I know, Sina, you've just had a wonderful experience going to visit a group in Georgia. And you might explain just a little bit of what that weekend was like, how it made you feel as a person, as a family, and then I'll share a little bit more from what we had from Texas.
Yes, thank you, Joel. And I love this concept of this exit and build. And like you said, I'm not a conspiracy theorist either, but it's like what we're taught growing up, like in Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, always be prepared, right? So I just think it's important to be able to stand on your own 2 feet, to be able to, know where your food's coming from so you can feed yourself and your family, and just be as free as possible so that you aren't a slave to any system or any one person. And that's what my family and I are also in pursuit of creating for ourselves. And as you mentioned, a big component for us is trying to find this community. And it's quite interesting because I have felt this need for community for my whole life, really, but particularly strongly in the last 9 years. and had not been able to find it, struggled, searching for it in many different areas under many different capacities. And it was a remarkable thing, because what happened was I went to Robin's retreat, and not not expecting to find community at all, but I did. I found 3 women there who started sharing about excuse me, about their community and what it's like. And they are a homesteading group, and they get together every month and share their passions. And it's a small town with that small town feel, and they all know each other, and they have festivals, and they come together and have library programs and all this great stuff. And it moved me to the point where I got goosebumps and I started tearing up as she was explaining their community. And it was funny because I couldn't remember the name of the city, but I called my husband that night and I said, "That's it. I know where we're moving. It's this small town up in the mountains in Georgia, and it starts with a D." Like, and he's like, okay, you're off on one of your tangent things again. Okay. Well, I get home and I said to my husband, I said, "I know that we are supposed to go here. So we're going, like, we're going to go visit it." And it just so happened 4 days later, we jumped in the car and with the kids and everything, drove over to this town, and we all fell in love with it. And I tell you, Joel, this was God that lined all this up for us, because so many things just fell into place. There was a annual homeschool field day that happened to be on one of the 4 days that we happened to be in this town. We met over 200 homeschool families. Instantly, we're invited to different play dates and co-ops and field trip groups. There was a church that I wanted to go to for years. It happens to be about 35 minutes from this town. And we found out that one of my husband's good friends from college attends that church. So we attended the church with him, and it was fantastic. Even my kids loved going to that church, which is remarkable. They wanted to go back. But it was everything that I have been asking for, as I've been, communicating with God and saying, putting it out there that this is what I want for community, and not finding it, right? And can you imagine over 9 years of actively looking for some kind of community that you have in your mind that you've never actually experienced, but you just believe in your heart that it's real and that it exists and you can manifest it. All of a sudden, after this 9 years, God led us to that place, and all those things just fell into place. And to answer your question about how we felt accepted, we felt understood, and we felt heard. We felt like we have found our people. It was instantly the feeling of a tribe. It was all these things I had wanted and couldn't exactly feel it for myself because I'd never experienced it. But once we walked into it, it was just this undeniable truth. Like in your heart, it just felt like this is how it's supposed to be. Like, this is what community feels like. There wasn't judgment, right? There wasn't somebody telling me all these things I'm doing wrong or things I should do differently, or, it was support. It was open-mindedness. It was people understanding what may be coming and willing to work together, even if that means like a barter system, willing to work together to help each other, because realizing that at the end of the day, we're all just individual people. It was beautiful. It was in one word, it was love.
No, the fact is that in our pell-mell run in our culture toward individuality and personal self-expression, the tendency has been also for that pendulum also to swing too far to one side, to where we have lost our sense of relational community with the greater, the greater context. And those of us who are conservatives, we bristled at Hillary Clinton saying it takes a village, to raise a child. Well, it does take a village to raise a child. And so, we need to think in those terms. So at this thing, I got to share some time with Paul Wheaton. And so he did a book. I don't know if you can see this okay. Several years ago, it's building a better world in your backyard instead of being angry at bad guys. And and so that was his first. That was his first book. And Paul Wheaton runs the largest permaculture. It's the largest permaculture website in the world it's called Permies, Permies, Permies. And he's got like 1.8 million people sign in. And he's just done another book. It's called Skip. All right, Skip. And that stands for Skills to Inherit Property. And so the whole goal of this book is that there is so much land. I'm going to the intentional community here. There is so much land being available in the U.S. right now as farmers age out. He and I have both experienced reach outs from people looking for a young person to either, can I inherit my land to them? Can I get a young partner in here to work with me that then we can work out a real amicable, succession, in the future? My kids don't want the farm. And so what can I do? And so the problem is that almost no young person is worthy. I loved his use of the word worthy. And so what he's done here with this Skip program is he's got a 3-level program of activities that a person can do and go like elementary, middle school, high school to show to do the first thing is carve a wooden spoon. Okay, carve a wooden spoon, and he's got all these things where as you go through them, think about it as a Boy Scout merit badge program on steroids. Okay, and over the course of months or at its most complex, even a year, you go through these steps to show that you are worthy of inheriting a piece of land. And so this whole idea of coming back to the land with a vetting procedure, so that the aging landowner isn't just giving it off to some young fantasy-eyed entitlement person, and so the young person is coming prepared well enough to not fail, that has this track record of worthiness to receive the gift. That's a powerful thing. And I think the fact that he has developed this entire program shows what transition our culture is in. We don't have a smooth transitional mechanism right now to move into this next land stewardship capacity. We're all reading about Bill Gates, now owning 250,000 acres of farmland, but even as much as that is, that's tiny. That's nothing. Okay, that's nothing. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of farmers and millions of acres out there that are being abandoned, that are not being cared for at all, that are looking for a steward. And so that's one of the approaches. Another one of the speakers was Jim Gale, who has developed a program called Food Forest Abundance. This is another permaculture concept where he actually, if I have a backyard, I'm in suburbia, I want to convert my yard to a food forest abundance. They will come in, look at your climate, look at your situation, design tell you, here are the best species to grow in your area. Here's how you prep the ground. They'll even put it in for you if you want that to be done. But they're developing a global network, and they're just getting traction up the wazoo. Why? Because the store shelves are empty. And when store shelves are empty, there's a Chinese saying that says, plenty of food, many problems. No food, one problem. And leave it to the Chinese to distill everything right into one point. And so as this awareness of inflation and petroleum, gas, empty store shelves. I mean, Biden is telling us we're gonna have shortages, and as these things hit the press, people are starting to wake up, to be aware of these kinds of things. And so there are all sorts of things. Now, one of the other speakers was Marjorie Wildcraft, who has done a wonderful book about backyard self-sustaining. And I listened to her talk. It was a wonderful talk. She says, where you start is with chickens, and then you go to vegetables, and then you go to rabbits. And she's an engineering mind, and she just looks at sheer caloric nutrient production, and the combination of animal. Interestingly, in full disclosure, of forest farming abundance has brought me in. They have not had any animal component up until now, and so now they've just now asked me to come on board as kind of their animal component. We're going to be doing some videos and things on how to do backyard chickens and incorporate that into your food forest. And again, the beauty of that is when you have a food forest. So for our listeners that aren't used to the term food forest, the idea there is that rather than planting annuals, squash and watermelons and green beans, a food forest is a multi-speciated forestal and woody species perennial that you plant in communities that are symbiotic. So you have tall growers, short growers, and seasonally. So you have early producers, late producers. You have things that are cold tolerant, hot tolerant, and you essentially create a backyard that produces throughout the season without having to be planted except the first time. Just plant it one time. So it continues to plant, and it produces different kinds of things. The mulberries come on before the apples come on before the pears come, and so you basically have a grazing, you have a fresh fruit grazing option from your own land. And the study, the research, the work that they've done indicates that literally in our backyards and the medians of our urban streets, we can literally grow all of our food. We don't have to be sitting here biting our fingernails about Ukrainian wheat and Russian fertilizer. We can do it all right here, proximate ourselves. And so it was just a delightful time to get together with people who have been working in this space a long time, from intentional communities to backyard subsistence to perennial plant communities. All these systems revolve around plant, people, animal relationships that are integrated and not segregated. And it was just a great, exciting thing. And I would encourage people to look up the exit and build and get some. Everything was taped, and I'm sure it's all available.
That's wonderful. So you mentioned these intentional communities. are they seeing a movement to, first of all, maybe explain to our listeners what is an intentional community? And are people flocking to these intentional communities?
Well, if we compare the interest from 5 years ago, yes, it would be flocking. Is it a majority of the population? Of course not. It's a lunatic fringe right now. It's a lunatic fringe that's seeing signs of the times and saying, hey, let's make a change here. So an intentional community is where you actually intentionally bring in a group of people. Now, it can start with 2 families. All right, it can be that small, but basically, rather than my family and I are going to go out and find a place and we're going to scratch out a pioneer living. All right, instead, you start from the premise we're going to either go with a friend, or we're going to find a place and then have other people living there on the land. Sometimes people, create an entity, an umbrella that owns the land as an umbrella, maybe an LLC or something that owns the land in trust. And then we build houses. We build houses, everything from each person has, a couple of acres to we cluster all the houses together in a co-housing situation where we share an outdoor wood stove, we share some solar panels, we share a septic system, and we share a well. And so all the costs drop by 40% to everybody because you don't have to duplicate everything. And you intentionally you go in not intending to be a hermit. You go in intending to live proximate to people who share your values. And I think that's, in the United States, our culture has been this fierce independence where, Daniel Boone, I need more room, says Daniel Boone, right? And we've, as a culture, we have cultivated, it's in our DNA, this fierce independence. And it's like we've taken that to an extreme. And now many of us are realizing that has weaknesses as well. When you run it off the extreme and you cast off where you don't know your neighbor, you don't know the person living in the condominium next door, and you're out here on your own. How do I fix my leaky pipe? How do I fix a breaker box? We're starting to realize that, as when you can't get help and you can't get contractors and you can't get food and energy is too expensive to buy and you can't get baby formula, right? And you can't do all these things. We're realizing, my lands, all I know how to do is sit in front of a computer and punch keys. I'm not very valuable. I don't have the skill set. And so I actually went and visited a farm, a guy, he's an IT, he's an IT engineer, he's a mechanical engineer. He's, sat in front of a computer all of his life and punched in these things. And several years ago, the thought hit him, man, if I need to grow my own food, I don't know how to do it. If I need to build a house, I don't know how to do it. And so through the course of several years, he gradually, they got onto a 6.5 acre place near Austin, Texas. And I was able to see where they've come now in 10 years of he's building a building out of aircrete. So rather than concrete, it's aircrete. And so you take cement and you blow soap bubbles through it, and it makes a high insulative, and it makes the cement go like 6 times as far. So it's very, very cheap. Anybody can do this. And he's just doing this with his 2 kids. He's got 3 kids, but 2 of them, the 2 of them are she's like 10 and 6, and he and the 10-year-old and the 6-year-old, they're building this house out of Air Creek, and he's never built anything. And so he just kept saying, he said, look, all I want is, I just want to be useful. I don't want to feel like I'm completely at the mercy of the system as the system starts to break down. So that's where this intentional community. So they're looking at some cottages on the backside where other people would come and they share equipment, they share garden space, they share energy. Shoot, that they could even, you could have 4 families that share 2 automobiles. Okay. I mean, I've been at the Bruderhof intentional communities. I've been those and done seminars there where, so this is not a commune, although I've been at communes as well. I was at one commune. Listen, Sina, I was at one commune. I walked into the dining common where everybody eats their meals, in shared in common. And there's a whole wall with all the underwear, men's small, medium, large, women's small, medium, large, children's, all this. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. I'm not sure I'm ready for, to share underwear. So, that's on the other extreme of a commune. Okay. But intentional community is not a commune, but people are living nearby so that there can be a tremendous sharing of things. There's always, somebody to babysit, somebody to fix your automobile, somebody to do the electrical, somebody to do the plumbing, somebody that's really good at grafting trees and developing, horticulture, and somebody great at cooking and food, and a good person knows how to fix clothes and makes darn socks, and maybe somebody that knows how to sew leather and fix shoes, and so you get this group together. Suddenly you don't even have to trade money. There's no money. You don't have to earn any money. You very little money. And maybe a couple people, keep their town jobs and they actually bring the cash in, just enough cash in the community. But you have all this skill set. And so several of the speakers talked about the actual, legal and, agreement contractual constructs to be able to not, to not get yourself in trouble legally. And the one, if I could say, the one weak link of the thing was there wasn't a lot of discussion on how to maintain the tender relationships so that people don't get, easily offended. That's the other end of community. That's why people run away from it. Is, man, I don't want these, weirdos around me. And so that's the tendency. And I think as these things develop, there will be, additional ones. I know an agri-hood. I've been very friendly with an agri-hood in Cincinnati. It's a lady. She inherited a farm. How do I keep this farm? 100 acres. How do I keep it? Well, she was a developer, so she created an agri-hood where she carved out 25 house lots around the perimeter of this property, and everybody pays into a fund to hire a farmer that does the interior 80 acres, grows all their food, and everybody uses a common septic field, a common well, and they share, heating systems. And so, you have all this sharing going on. So what it does is it allows people to live much, much cheaper and much less dependent on outside than they did before. And so I'm sorry, I rambled on, but that's the idea of the intentional community. You go into community intending to make community, not intending to me and mama and nobody else, and we're going to do our thing and we don't care what anybody else says. You actually self-limit yourself to get the advantage of other people's skills and talents in proximate living.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you bring up a great point of differentiating between independence from the system, right? Because you and I are both trying to have independence from the system, but
Sure.
not independence from community, right? Those are two separate things. So when we talk about, in all of our podcasts and books and whatnot, when we talk about being more independent, I think that's what we're referring to, is not being a slave to the system, but we are both wanting that connection with
Right.
community, with like-minded individuals, and beyond just the, reducing the cost, the sharing of the resources, the sharing of the passion, saving time because you're dividing up the labor, for instance. Beyond that is the health component, to feeling like you are in community and that you are supported and connected with somebody and heard. I talked about that on a recent podcast with Hilda, about the study showing mortality rates going up as high as 90% when people don't feel connected, when they feel isolated, even when they're surrounded by thousands of people and they still feel isolated because they haven't connected with these like-minded individuals. So I think that it's very wise for people to be looking at these intentional community options. Donnie and I, or my husband and I, we looked at intentional communities as well. If anybody wants to look at that, you could just even type into the internet, intentional communities, and they pop. There's all kinds of websites now. They pop up everywhere. And we looked at a bunch of them and considered going into some of them. But at the end of the day, each one of those didn't resonate with us for a different reason. But like you said, you can have your own, and that's what we're finding, is the group getting together. And so anyhow, I just think there's a lot of wisdom in that as well. And I think this is really exciting that there's people talking about this, that we don't feel like we're necessarily alone, or, the lunatic fringe that we're in is growing, right?
Yes.
For one reason or another. And I think that's just very hopeful. And it fills my heart with joy that we are creating solutions, right, to whatever problems that we're seeing with the government and the elites and the Great Reset. We're creating our own local solutions. And so I feel much more empowered now and much more encouraged now than I did prior to COVID even.
Yeah.
And I'll let you wrap it up.
Yeah. Well, you're exactly right. And with COVID I think that forced isolation, brought a lot of these kind of sub feelings to a head. And then the whole censorship thing and just the bifurcation. And so all of that, that cultural angst, I think, is awakening a new yearning in the hearts of many people to actually connect, to reconnect to something, to not be so isolated. That means sometimes you gotta give a little bit, right? In order to, just like a marriage, right? You give a little bit, but the benefits are truly incredible, and I'm glad that some people are thinking about these things. Thanks, Sina. Thanks for the great discussion. Thank you all for listening and for being a part of this discussion. And we look forward to visiting with you next time.